Earlier today, Blaze News investigative journalist Steve Baker spoke with reporters after pleading guilty in his January 6th case. Here's what he had to say.
I made the decision specifically to avoid the shaming exercise of the trial. I've watched enough of these trials, as you know, from the media room and in the courtrooms to know that that's exactly what these are.
So here to break it all down is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief for Blaze News, and Steve Baker himself. So, Steve, take us through your decision to plead guilty here today.
My decision was very easy. After my sentencing hearing last Wednesday, which was, of course, the day after President Trump was confirmed to have won the election, I went through what I consider a brutal hearing in which the Justice Department, not only them, but also the court itself, showed their inflexibility, and they showed to me that they were going to not allow us to present my case as that I've imagined in my mind for 3 years now that I would ultimately present my case if I was charged. And then after being charged back in March of this year, I've had 10 months now to build that case, working with my attorneys. The court denied us on every single motion that we made in order to put forward the case that we wanted to present, which was a case of selective prosecution, a violation of the First Amendment in terms of my behavior that day. I behaved completely, 100% professionally as a journalist. That was what I did on January 6th, as did 80 to 100 other journalists. The fact that the court denied us the right to present that case, I told my attorneys in a Zoom call that we made immediately after my hearing last Wednesday that I was not going to do this. I was not going to allow the government to put me through nothing more than a shaming exercise, and to be quite frankly, a 100% losing record for January 6th defendants. In Judge Christopher Cooper's courtroom, there has not been a single exoneration, not a single acquittal. So I was going up against that buzzsaw if I did go to trial today. So I instructed my attorneys to inform the court and inform the Department of Justice that I would be pleading guilty to all 4 charges today and denying them that opportunity. And that's what we did.
So to be clear, I mean, justice denied. I mean, here they said you could not claim, they didn't care about the selective prosecution. They don't care about the fact that they haven't gone after hardly any other journalists. And then also, could you say something about the way these trials go forth? Because I don't think people understand the extent to which people aren't allowed to defend themselves within them.
Well, Matt, I can give you example after example, beginning with the Oath Keepers trial, which, of course, was the biggest, most publicized January 6th trial of all back in the fall of 2022. And I was there every day for 9 weeks. I saw how those defendants were denied the right to present evidence that was exculpatory evidence in their own trial. And yet the government was allowed to present basically anything that they wished. Though the government chief prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Nestler, pointed across the room at the Oath Keepers in his opening statement. I was sitting in the courtroom with him. He pointed at them and said, these people were the tip of the spear. These people led the insurrection. These were the leaders of the violence, except that the Oath Keepers weren't even on the property when the violence began, when the first barricades and the first doors were breached. They were leading their security details over to the approved licensed stages that were set up on the Capitol property at the time. And then you go from the Oath Keepers down to the case of, for instance, Stephen Horn, a young independent journalist who had been acquiring press badges for the journalism that he had done since he was 16 years old. Now, fast forward at 22 years old, facing the federal government denied him the right to present to the jury proof that he had been a journalist since he was 16 years old. They were not even allowed to show the entire dossier that he had collected and put together of his journalism since he was a kid. And they denied him that right, and they found him guilty on the same 4 basic misdemeanors that I pled guilty to today.
By the way, we should tell our audience, I saw what he told you today on X, that his probation officer wouldn't allow him to go cover your issue today. He couldn't go to D.C. to do that. He's still suffering under this. Never mind the fact, of course, that no one has actually been convicted of insurrection. But let's leave that aside. You have something to tell us about what happened in the courtroom. We spoke about this earlier today. It's very disturbing. Explain what this judge did and said today.
Well, I actually, Judge Chris Cooper committed an unforced error today. I think he made a big mistake. One of the things that happens is that when a sentencing hearing is set, and they did set mine for March 6th, he asked the clerk there in the court, what will my sentencing hearing date be? She said March 6th at 10 a.m. Then he said, and he proceeded to go forward and said, now, because I'm not likely to see you in March, which, by the way, that was a clear indication that he's expecting these pardons to come down. He admitted twice in his soliloquy that he was probably not going to see me again in March or in his courtroom. And based on the fact that he probably wasn't going to see me, he was going to go ahead and deliver the same admonishments against this defendant that he would in every other a sentencing hearing related to January 6th or any other trial, non-January 6th related at all. So what he ended up doing is he ended up spending the next 5 or 10 minutes admonishing me for my speech. He never criticized my behavior. He admitted that I don't know you that well, obviously, because we didn't present my case in trial. He doesn't know all about me, but he certainly has been reviewing my journalism, because the first thing that he did is he regurgitated what the FBI had said about me in one of my television interviews that I did on the evening of the 6th with WUSA 9 here in D.C., and he regurgitated one of those accusations completely out of context, and then he went on for the remainder of his time to criticize my journalism. He actually criticized me criticizing the quote-unquote weaponized Department of Justice. Then he criticized my criticisms of the bias of the D.C. courts and jury. These are things that I've been writing about for 2 or 3 years now. We have a judge, a federal district court judge on record now, criticizing a journalist for his criticism of the government. I think he blew it, and we now have it all on the record.
Yeah, Steve, that is an unbelievable story, but somehow yet here we are. You're talking about Donald Trump and promising to pardon the January 6th defendants. You said this year you are a single issue voter, and this is exactly it. So what do you think the likelihood is that that will follow through and get done?
Well, I'm more confident today than I ever have been because of Christopher Cooper. Judge Cooper's twice making the remarks that I'm not likely to see you in March means that they're even talking about it around their own judges' roundtable, water cooler, or whatever they do there at the D.C. District Courthouse. Obviously, they're expecting it to come down. And these guys are pretty well connected, and they know what's going on.
So we can safely say also, though, that this judge has been assiduously reading Blaze News, right?
Well, apparently so. The fact that he only criticized me for one of my statements that the FBI called into question on January 6th itself, but then he spent the rest of the time criticizing my journalism. And I think that's a pretty good indication that he must be reading what we're writing or watching our BlazeTV programs.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, but hello, Judge Cooper, if you're watching, please. Continue. We love having the audience. So what happens next? And, tell us about next steps and sentencing and your thoughts on timing of pardons and so forth and so on.
Judge Cooper reiterated today that I would still be for the next several months operating under my current pretrial restrictions. Now, unlike most January 6th defendants, like Stephen Horn, who was denied the right to come to D.C. today to cover my hearing from North Carolina, I don't have that restriction on me. I only have to notify my pretrial services officer of my intended travel. I have to let them know where I'm going and then when I'm coming back. That's it. I don't have any restrictions on my travel. That is unlike, as I said, any other January 6th defendant. I still don't have my right to carry a self-defense weapon at all. I have very few other restrictions on me, and so that will be maintained until my sentencing hearing, or if the sentencing hearing is then interdicted by a presidential pardon.
Well, that is definitely the route that we are going to be hoping and praying for you, Steve.